Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
Okay, it's 6:32. This is a Zoom meeting of the Wyndham Northeast Supervisory Union Board. Today is September 30, and the WNESU board will come to order. Currently, we have a quorum of the board, which from the high school is Deb Wright, and myself, I'm David Clark. From Rockingham board, we have Priscilla Lambert and George Smith. The Union Elementary Board, which is Athens, Grafton, Westminster, we have Cheryl Charles and Jessa West Clark. We have Jack Breyer in the room in an unofficial capacity as a voting member at the moment, but Jack has indicated a willingness to help us out if we need it. Okay, there are some adjustments to the agenda. Owing to an oversight on the part of the Supervisory Union Chair, an item called the minutes, approval of the minutes, were inadvertently left off of this agenda, and that would be the minutes of the meeting of September 9. We're going to add that to make things just slightly easier for the chair to track as item 2A. Which will follow, obviously, the agenda, the adjustments to the agenda that we're doing now. Chris has suggested that we move reports up to item 4, and that is because he anticipates having the principals here, and he would like to cut them loose because just like our central administrators are very, very busy people, and if we can give them a little extra room to operate, I think that'd be very helpful. So reports reports which are listed as item 6 on this agenda will become item 4 immediately after communications and public comments. And I will note that there will be one exception to that, and that will be the item formerly known as reports 6B, which is now reports 4B, and that is the Lynn Law report on the business office. This is a legal matter, which is appropriate for discussion in executive session, and in fact, when we get there, I will give you Pietro Lynn's opinion on why we're there. Okay, we have old business moving into the number 5 slot where new business was. And new business, heaven help me here. New business becomes item 6, and I'm going to note 2 additional adjustments under 6. 6A, that's our new business item for establishing a building search committee. I would like to entertain a motion to establish a committee in open session, which is the appropriate way to do that. But because we will be discussing real estate, and real estate is an executive session topic, I would like to move into executive session for a discussion of the specifics. The other item here is what would be business office oversight, which is your old 5C and will become your new 6C. We're going to take that into executive session because it involves personnel matters, which the superintendent's office is currently working on, but feels that the boards, or this board, needs to be updated on that. So those are your adjustments. I hope
One
everybody
point of order.
got those. Yes, Jack.
Yeah, on your building search committee, I assume this is a building search committee for relevant to the facility that on Cherry Hill. And if it is the case, there was in fact a search committee that existed. It was, and we met literally just before COVID broke up. Broke us up on a couple of occasions and took some documents. And that search committee consisted of Molly, me, the no longer chair of the rock board, and I'm not sure, it may have included you, David. I'm trying to remember that part. Is this a different search committee?
I'm considering the individuals that you've just cited, Jack, as being volunteers for a renewed search committee.
Okay, I just was thinking, I thought we had one and we just were lacking a member, but maybe I am
In that case,
misunderstanding.
when we get to our new item 6A, formerly item 5A under new business action, establish building search committee, I'll be looking for a motion then to affirm the membership of the search committee.
Fair enough.
Point of order.
Yes,
This is a
Priscilla.
reorganization. This is a reorganization because it's after, we have not done anything with that since this new year. So it has to be a reorganization, not, so it's not
We
the same.
met
It would
in
not
March.
necessarily be the same.
Priscilla.
I'm going to suggest that instead of having this discussion right now, let's move down when we get there to establish search committee
Sure.
and see if we can't get a better grasp of what it is exactly we want to do and who's going to be doing the legwork. That be all right, Priscilla?
Sure.
Jack?
That, it's all right with me, but also I have another question. Will the principals be reporting then under the reopening update, which is listed under the superintendent?
We're going to do that right after we get done with our action on the minutes.
Okay, but the principals, will they be reporting as well? Because it's only listed as the superintendent and assistant.
I'm going to defer to Chris. I believe that's the case. Chris, is that right?
Yeah, yes, they will be.
And Priscilla, I
Okay.
misspoke. It's the intent to run this agenda. I'm sorry that there's so many corrections here to the agenda, but it will run from call to order, adjustments, communications, and then those reports, which will, I believe, include the principals. Are there any other questions or adjustments? Questions should be pertinent to adjustments. Okay, I think we're good. So I would like to entertain a motion to accept the minutes of September 9th as printed. Can I have a motion, please? All right, I'll put a motion on the floor.
Oh,
I have a second. I'm seconding Priscilla's motion. Thank you, Priscilla. All right. I presume everyone has had time to check those minutes. Are there any corrections? Deb? Or is that you, Cheryl?
Yes, this is Cheryl. I've got one correction. Just for the record, I'd like to see Ian Spartalotti's name spelled correctly. And so I can send that by email or just try to do it quickly. But at any rate, we need to see.
I would suggest you submit it by email, but for the benefit of the meeting, would you please spell it out for us? And I'm sure Ian will also appreciate the correction, Cheryl.
Right. He's former chair of the Westminster School Board, as a by the way. His last name is S.B. as in boy, A.R.D. as in dog, E.L.L.A.T.I. Spartalotti.
Thank you, Cheryl. Any other corrections? All right, then, all in favor of approving the minutes as corrected. I'm going to roll call you. Deb Wright,
Aye.
thank you. Priscilla,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
okay. Cheryl,
Aye.
Jessa.
Aye.
All right, Chris, am I missing any members who may have recently joined?
I'm here, David.
Oh, great, Jason. Who won the game?
Hartford by a lot.
Oh, and
And
you
I am
you
here
are
for Brenda.
okay, and thank you, Molly. And you are voting aye or no?
Aye.
Thank you, Jason. Molly.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved. We are under communication and public comment. Are there any?
Mr. Clark, is my third member present tonight? Is Lynn there? I couldn't see.
I'm not finding Lynn here on the list. Chris, has Lynn joined us?
Dr. Carey?
No, she hasn't.
She hasn't.
Oh, Lynn Morgan.
Right.
I just,
Has not joined.
Okay. Jack, do you wish to become a voting?
yeah, I will be
Elementary?
official. Yep.
Are you accepting the self-appointment as a member of Union Elementary?
Kind of what's happened, yes.
Thank you. Okay. And how do you vote on the minutes?
I'm going to abstain because I think there is a small error, but it's so minor I don't want to get into it, and I can't flip back and forth. I'm on an iPad tonight, so I can't really see the minutes at the same time as I can see the screen. So I'll abstain for now.
Thank you for the mercy, Jack. All right, Chris, we're down to reports.
Great. Good evening, everyone. And so I have asked the principals to join us tonight because this is really the first meeting we've had besides the high school meeting that it really gives the all of us to update the board as well as the community in regards to what we've already been trying to put together as going from step 2 to step 3. So before getting into that, there's a quick update I want to give. It's on the H969 appropriations bill, the bill that relates to education funding and education policy. So I'm just going to go over the highlights of that. This bill provides a budget for the state of Vermont for the fiscal year of 2021 for Coronavirus Relief Fund, the labeled CRF appropriations for pre-K education, and was appropriated as followed. Total 103 million appropriations is allocated to independent schools. 5 million is directed to efficiencies fund school district to improve school heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, all these are known as the HVAC systems. The remaining 88.3 million is reimbursed to school districts for COVID-19 costs through the Coronavirus Relief Fund. An LEA grant program is being administered through the Vermont Agency of Education. The appropriated CARES Act funding proves to be the efficient to cover all reimbursement requests, meaning as we spend money that's been directly related to the COVID stuff, is that we mark them with a certain code so we know when we submit for getting some of this reimbursement that we can do it in a timely manner. So we have been keeping on track of that. It's necessary, and it shall be on the request from the school districts of reposed expenses that freed up the previously budgeted funds in the fiscal year. That meaning any money we use to pay for anything for PPEs or safety equipment, air quality, and that will be able to access this money to offset that spending that we had to do. The bill also establishes a count for average daily membership for each school districts, not less than no more than the 2019 school year ADM. I guess you can look at that as kind of like the hold harmless that we talked about with Act 46. So they're going to keep the daily count average of daily membership for each school district not less than the last year's ADM. In addition, the other thing, they finally approved the reduction from 175 student days to 170 student attendant days. So right now, it's possible that the student's last day without any snow days would be June 11th instead of the previous June 18th of the last days. But that's where we are right now. That we all know that last day of school date can certainly change based on all the uncertainties that we have, COVID and also the weather. So moving on to moving from step 2 to step 3. This was put in place on September 26th by the governor. This change in step level does not change the decision-making authority of the school districts to offer in-person instruction or not. But if a district decides to do so, it must operate in-person instruction at a step 3. Future changes in the step levels will be by the Agency of Education and the Department of Health after evaluating the health conditions for the virus. Moving from step 2 to 3 does not mean that all students return on 9/26. The moving from step 2 to 3 gives schools more options that would allow us to start bringing back students to the schools as long as we can meet the safety requirements. Step 3 allows, so what does step 3 allow us to do? Step 3 allows us to put more students on a bus if needed. Communal areas such as gyms and cafeterias can be used for their intended purposes. Once again, as long as we meet the safety requirements of social distancing and disinfecting. All social distancing still apply, just as it did in step 2. K through 5 is no less than 3 feet, and 6 through 12 remains at 6 feet. So you have 3 and 6 there. Step 3 allows more options and considerations for the education and rationale of mixing students together, because as you know, right now, a lot of us are still in pods. So just to clarify, the state is the only entity that makes the decision on step movements, not the local districts. And as we all know, is that the fall sports started on September 26th as well, even though it doesn't look like the traditional that we all had hoped for, but at least kids have some kind of athletics going on. So at this time, I would now like to have each of the principals give an update on the direction that each school is going or would like to go in regards to starting the process for bringing students back into the schools. As stated earlier, each school task force has continued to meet on a regular basis, as well as the SU task force that is made up of all the SU district directors and administrators. I'm now going to ask each principal to provide a brief update on each of the schools are exploring in regards to moving from step 2 to 3. Please keep in mind that this is just an initial update to all the boards, and principals will be getting into the more specifics with each of their individual boards. So with that said, I'd like to have Mrs. Richard Helen Peel from principal of Athens Grafton give an update. Helen?
Thank you. Trying to move my computer up so I can turn my video on. There we go. Oh, it's kind of dark in here. There we go. How's that? Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all. So our task force, meets pretty regularly, at least once a week. And then there's a fair amount of informal meetings that we have because this, lots of things come up on a daily basis that we need to sort of put our heads together and think through and make sure we're following all the safe and healthy requirements. So what our task force is thinking about right now is that we have the ability to bring back K-2 on October 16th. And mostly that has to do with combining cohort A and B together and having them in the building 4 days a week instead of just 2 days. The committee definitely wants to keep Wednesday as a day where deep cleaning can occur so that we can have a break in the middle of the week to make sure that we're staying on top of keeping this virus under control. We're able to do this because of the 3 feet requirement for K-5. So it certainly makes it possible with the numbers that we have to be able to do that. We know that our K-2 students will benefit much more greatly by being in school and getting instruction on a daily basis from their teachers. They're doing fine doing it remotely, but we know that that direct instruction with a teacher will definitely be far better than being at home. The specials, because of the smallness of our building, with the opening of the gym, that gives us the flexibility to be able to use that, because it's used for, it's not just the gym, it's the cafetorium, it's the art room, it's the music room, it's where pretty much all the specials occur. So it gives us a little bit more flexibility to be able to do that and to facilitate having those specials as we bring back more of our students. And as of today, we made a plan to, because we can, because of the social distancing requirements, to bring back our 3rd through 6th 2 weeks later on November 2nd. And so that gives us a 2-week window in between the two transitions to make sure we've worked out all the kinks and all the systems are working, and we've thought of everything we're supposed to think about to keep everybody safe and healthy. We're still going to do as much of our teaching as possible outside. We do have our 4 tents up now, so each classroom does have a tent that they can go to get outside. The weather has been incredibly cooperative, and we've been able to get out a great deal, so that's working out well. And teachers are currently designing what kind of furniture to be able to have in these tents so that there's a nice flow of air, but it also, we can meet those requirements of social distancing. Let's see. We did decide that we'd like to start back full days and not do half days. That felt a little too cumbersome, not only for teachers, but for our families. Families right now are already struggling with trying to figure out childcare on the 3 days that they're not in school. So to ask them to make another transition of figuring out how to do it half days while we transition and then to full days, we decided that we could do it full days and there really would not be that big of a burden on the faculty. So for that reason, we'd like to recommend full day, having them come back. Lunches will continue in the classrooms, and we will continue to use the way the system is set up with the food service. They're doing an excellent job. Teachers are actually enjoying having lunches in the classroom. There's much more of a social opportunity. When you have too many kids sometimes in a cafeteria, it's hard to manage and it's hard to have that social interaction. So they're really enjoying having that opportunity to do that. I think that's about it. You know, it obviously does require the great work that's occurring with both Stacy and Andrew for special education, because I know several of our pairs had to be shared on a Monday, Tuesday, and then a Thursday, Friday. So that requires rethinking again of how to do that to support our students who need that services with special education, but they're working hard on trying to figure that all out. But I know that getting that in place will be contingent on whether we can follow through with this plan. But other than that, you know, we're feeling pretty good. You know, things have gone really well and we're ready to take that next step, and we think we can, but we want to continue to go slow to make sure that we continue to stay strong and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. Great update. Next, I'm going to ask Principal Laura Hazard of Saxons River. Laura?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'll be brief. Our transition plan, our task force met today, and our transition plan from step 2 to step 3 includes this week using our multi-purpose room for socially distanced PE classes when PE cannot be held outside due to the weather. So if it's pouring rain, the class will be inside, and we are able to do that and maintain the 6 feet. Of course, we will use the outdoors whenever possible. And the week of October 19th, that's the Monday of that week, Wednesdays will continue to be remote, much like Helen described.
A little faster. No, maybe if you want a thieving little bastard.
Our K2 students, we would invite back the week of October 19th for school full days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, while our 3-4 students would remain on an AB hybrid schedule. Everyone would continue to have breakfast and lunch in their classrooms for the same reason Helen described, and our art and music classes, instead of doing a 3-week rotation, we'll do a 1-week rotation. Then the week of November 2nd, we will continue with the remote learning on Wednesdays, and all of our students we would invite back. K-4 students would attend school for full days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, continuing at that time to have breakfast and lunch in the classroom. That's it from Saxon's River.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Next up, I'm going to ask Mrs. Kennedy, principal of Central School.
Hi, good evening. So similar elementary phase, our kindergarten would be able to return on October 19th. What is different is that unfortunately our first and second grades will need a little bit more time before we can bring them back in. So we're hoping by November 2nd, we'll be able to bring the first and second grades back. But right now it's October 19th for kindergarten. As soon as we have furniture, we're waiting on an order for desks and chairs for our first and second graders, and also working with special ed on making sure we have the para supports for our students. Then so hopefully by November 2nd or possibly the 9th, we'll have second and first grade in. And then looking at November 9th for a third and fourth grade, but we are really in need of a teacher. That is the holdup, particularly for third grade. We have 29 students now in third grade and 21 in fourth grade. So we do need another teacher in order to bring both cohorts back in. So that will be the holdup for third and fourth grade. So they would continue to be remote until that time we have an extra teacher. So similar to what Laura was saying for PE and music and art and gym. So music and art will be on a 1-week rotation, and they will be on a cart in the school. Library is similar, that they will also be in the classrooms. Gym will be able to move back into the gym. And then the cafeteria, unfortunately, is not being able to use, but like Helen was saying, our teachers will be eating, or the students will be eating in their classrooms, and maintaining the physical distance for that. So our schedule is just slightly different in order to accommodate all of the students that we have at Central.
Great. Thank you, Carrie, very much. Next up, I'm going to have principal of Westminster School, Ms. Hardy.
Hello, everyone. Similar to what has been said, we are able to welcome back kindergarten, first, second, and third on October 19th. And that will be for Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then 2 weeks later on November 2nd, we are hoping to welcome back the fourth grade and the fifth grade. At this time, we're unable to bring back the sixth grade with the 6-foot social distancing. We cannot make that work at this point. And once we feel safe to do so, we can make that decision. But at this point, we're not, I don't have plans to welcome them back into the building full time. They'll be on the AB schedule. We'll continue to have breakfast and lunch in the classrooms as we've been doing all year. We'll continue our pod structure that we've had, and where one essentialist is assigned per pod per week, and we'll continue that rotation. So then we can use the art room and the music room and the gym when we're unable to get outside. Most of our instruction, as has been said before tonight, we are trying to get outside as much as possible. We'll continue with our playground zones so that we are keeping our pods in different zones per day, and that switches daily. So everyone is able to get into all areas of the playground throughout the week. And like has been said before, this is really contingent on student services and making sure we have supports for all our students before we really welcome all students back. And I think that is all I have. It is pretty much sums it up. It's very redundant from what the other principals have said.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Next up, Bellows Falls Middle School and Principal Ms. Karen Bukowski.
Hi, good evening. As kind of has been said by Principal Hardy, due to the 6-foot regulation for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I will need to remain in a hybrid for those 3 grades. However, for 5th grade with the 3 feet, I could bring back my 30 5th graders for 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, maintaining Wednesday for building cleanings. And we would add a 3rd pod to the 5th grade. So I would have 10 students in that pod. We're looking to do that in November, but effective this coming Monday, my unified art classes, that's art, music, and health, will begin teaching in their own classrooms. They have currently been traveling pod to pod. So they're looking forward to being able to be in their own space with their materials, and they will make that move starting this Monday. Mr. Reno can begin using the gym for classes when the weather doesn't cooperate, and that became effective on Monday. And as has already been said, we've been really fortunate with the way the weather has cooperated thus far. We're going to start exploring ways that we may be able to open our cafeteria, starting possibly with breakfast, and then looking at maybe for our 5th and 6th graders. Those are my lowest numbers by the makeup of the district, being that 5th and 6th graders for Athens, Grafton, and Westminster stay in their respective schools. Our task force and our staff really, we're developing plans to move forward. If we're able to, if social distancing changes, we would start by adding an additional pod at each grade level. But right now we cannot do that and maintain the 6 feet of social distancing, but that is our future plans if the social distancing guidelines are relaxed. That's all I have.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Bukowski. Next up, I'd like to ask Hodson, principal of Bellows Falls Union High School.
Good evening, folks. So step 2 to step 3 for the Bellows Falls Union High School will include the following. Our approach to expanding enrollment is also limited by the fact that we are still staying with the 6-foot distance between desks and classrooms. Even with a building where we can move our walls around, we have some limitations on making that happen. If we absolutely had to do it, we could, but there are a number of reasons why it wouldn't be great instructionally. If you're interested in that, I can get into those. But what we are planning to do is to start our stepwise approach to expanding our enrollment by first identifying students who are struggling remotely and to come up with a plan for those students to be in the classroom 4 days a week. I really don't have a solid number on that, but we've got some room for expansion there on that case-by-case basis. And that's one of the greater concerns of the staff is students who are struggling to engage or engage successfully on their remote days. So hopefully, not only will that help us to expand our in-person enrollment, but it'll also serve those students well and get them back on track or serve to keep them on track. The other parts that will loosen up a little bit, well, first of all, we noted that we are playing our sporting events. Today was a busy day. We had our first 7-on-7 football game. We had our first field hockey varsity and JV, and our second girls soccer game. All teams have played at least once or twice. So the students are very excited about getting the chance to do more than just compete against each other at practice. So we will also be expanding our use of the gym for PE. I will say that this time of the year, we're almost always outside anyhow, but if the weather turns bad, we'll now be able to use the gym for that. We opened up with single direction hallways as per the recommendation of the reopening guidelines. And given the size of our hallways, that restriction is going to go away starting tomorrow. But we do have arrows and lanes defined. So it's not only gonna help the students get from point A to point B a little bit better, but maybe work some of their driver's ed skills along the way. And we're also going to make some opportunities for morning extra help. And mornings, when students arrive, they've had to go straight to their first block class and just wait there for classes to begin. But we are making an opportunity for students to work with other teachers besides just first block. And we hope that's also going to improve student performance overall. That's the quick and dirty from the high school in terms of what step 2 to step 3 is intended to look like.
Great, thank you, Mr. Hodgson. Next up, I want to have Ms. Wolf, pre-K.
Hi, everyone. My video. There it is. Hi. The pre-K task force has been meeting and trying to see what we can do. The hybrid looks a little different for us. We had our younger group and older group. We didn't go alphabetical because we have our kids divided naturally that way. In hybrid for the younger 3-year-old students, it looks the same. It's the same day length, the same number of days. So moving forward, we are going to add, we hope to add Wednesdays to our older group so that they will come to school 3 days. Their number of hours was decreased because the childcare regulations around rest are based on how many hours the students are in the building, and the COVID safety regulations made rest sort of a non-starter for us. So their days aren't going to get any longer, but we're going to add Wednesdays for the older groups starting, or we hope to add Wednesdays for the older groups starting on October 21st. And that's it.
Great, thank you, Jen. To last but certainly not least, Mr. Haas, anything you want to add to the planning that has been we've been working on for the last week and a half?
Yeah, I think the principals kind of summed it up quite a bit. You know, they've been great in including us in their task force. It definitely is a challenge moving from phase 2 to phase 3 for us to ensure coverage and support for all of our students. You know, we're going to have to move a couple of folks from one building to another just to meet those needs. But, you know, we feel pretty comfortable that we can handle the job and move forward. Again, it comes right on the heels of we just finished revising all of the IEPs on our students, and we will now have to revise them once again. So, but it's kind of the nature of the beast.
Great. Anything else?
No, that's it.
All right. I mean, I think we covered all the principals and the director of special ed. Like I said, it's just a brief update to let you know the work that we started to do immediately. And, you know, the task force continue to meet. You know, I would like to thank the SU and the school task force members for all the ongoing planning and work, because we all know that this is and will continue to be a lot of work. And all the task forces are doing a great job planning for what's best for providing students with a safe and healthy transition back to school. And it really has been a collaborative effort. And I want to thank, you know, all the principals and all the members on the task force. And how that's been working out is that administrative team, we've been meeting once a week. I would say no less than two hours at a time. And looking at that as the SU task force to really come together and see how much, you know, what we need to do to meet the needs of each individual school. Because we want to look at this as collaboratively as possible, but during this time here, it's really difficult. We really got to take into consideration each individual school because the space needs are different. How many students we have is different. And so the SU team has really done a great job of listening to each other, helping each other out, and really putting our collective thoughts together to see what's going to work. As you can see from tonight, what the elementary principals, you know, have rolled out there and stuff, the timeline is pretty similar in regards to what they want to do. If we could be more similar in regards to the timelines, we would. We put all that thought into consideration. So once, you know, we continue to meet administrators as the SU task force, you know, from there, the principals go back and share the information we have, and they do a lot of work with their teachers and nurses and everyone that makes up that educational staff for their local school task force. And then the process starts all over again the following week, where they bring back what they've done, the work that they've done to the task force, and they bring it back to the SU team, and we rehash it out again. And there are times that we've, you know, that many of the task force, the SU task force and the school task force, have met multiple times during the week. We're trying to stay on top of this, and part of that is trying to keep the community and the boards as updated as possible, because it is constantly changing, and there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of layers to this process, but we just want to make sure that we're moving slow and making sure that we're covering all the bases that we need to for bringing kids back, like I said, in a health and safety environment, but also for the teachers as well. So I want to thank all the principals for attending their second SU meeting in such a short time. And I appreciate them taking the time to be here tonight and share all this information with all of you. So thank you. You're muted, David.
Thank you, Chris. Do you want to update us now on busing and pairs? That'd be reports 6A2.
Sure. So with the buses right now, we have 15 buses running. We have about a total of, it fluctuates a little bit, and we got about 150 students. The buses range from anywhere from 6 kids on them to 20 students on them. We're in the process, continue to adjust the routes accordingly. We've hired a bus para to ride on the buses, and we determine which bus that person would ride on based on the needs and the size of the students population on that bus. Students have assigned seats on the buses, so we're able to make sure that we can keep them pretty well spread out when you only have 4 or 6 kids on a bus that can hold 50 plus students. But that's also, it's just like everything else, it's ongoing. We continue to advertise for paras on the bus, and I think I'd like to hope that as we continue to move forward, we can get back on track in regards to looking at when things look more normal in regards to having kids back and school buses running, and that we can go back and revisit having paraeducators have some of the time to be the monitors on the bus in the AM and the PM sessions, as we negotiated last year. I think we'll get there, and that is our ultimate goal. But right now, like we've talked about in the past, it's very difficult to, even though we have the paraeducators back, based on the need that we need them for student services, and that's predominantly what most of them are doing, it's really tough to take, it's tough to schedule them during the hybrid model, because their time is occupied during those times before and after school, because they're tied to a student's IEP. And so we do want to continue to move forward with getting paras on the bus. But as you can imagine, people aren't jumping to be paraeducators or monitors on a bus at this time. We have one, that's one more than we had a few weeks ago, and we're gonna continue to pound the pavement and see if we can get people interested. So that's where we are with paraeducators and the buses.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I'm not aware that we have any questions on busing and pairs. I can stand corrected if someone wants to correct me. Can we talk about your history of your reopening committee? I think the board's very interested in how you've managed to keep all of these balls up in the air, Chris.
Yeah, well, initially, it was a learning process. We initially set up all the different task forces. We wanted to, the starting point was establishing what we need to do at the SU level. And we had that one meeting to get the ideas. And from that kind of morphed into, as once the SU task force and we rolled out the initial reopening plan, is that really the attention needed to be spent on the school task force. And the school task force were compromised, like I said before, of pretty much administrators, teachers, special educators, nurses, technology people. It was, it's really a well-represented group of educators around the table making these decisions that we've been having to make. And it kind of goes back to the cycle that we're going right now. The reopening plan that the SU that we created, that's still in place. It's just we're finding now by learning through this process that it's really the boots are really on the ground when it comes to the school task force, and letting the teachers and the administrators who are in that building every day are making the decisions that need to be made so we can bring the kids back as safely as possible. So it is something that, it started off one way and it slowly morphed into something else, only because for myself, I'm not on any school task force because I'm not there every day. I can't dictate, I can offer out suggestions, but the teachers and the employees are the ones who know exactly what they can do, who their kids are, so that's pretty much how the task force have merged. And like I said, it's an ongoing cycle. Like every week, we're just going back to the beginning. And so we're all trying to communicate as best as possible, because it is, it can be difficult sometimes that you're forgetting something because you don't have that in-person connection with people. And so often these meetings that we have, rely on that. So we're, like I said, at least once a week, but I mean, for the SU task force, it's 2 times a week. And for the local task force at the school, it's an ongoing conversation, but they have scheduled meetings once to twice a week, but it's constantly ongoing conversations we have, even if we don't have a formal meeting set up to address all the issues. But I'm really trying to not micromanage these local school task force teams and give them the leverage they need to make the decisions what's best for each of individual school.
Thank you, Chris. Do your task force keep minutes?
I mean, I guess it would depend on each school, but for the most part, I know the SU task force doesn't. It's just we have an agenda and we have some minutes that we keep, and that would have to be a board. The boards can ask each individual administrator that question at their board meetings.
Thank you, Chris. Anything else you want to cover under your report?
No, I just want to check to make sure I've covered everything that the board has.
Okay. As a reminder to the board, that was old item 6A. It's new item 4A. There is a new item 4B, which is the Lynn Law report in the business office. However, we have moved that to executive session. And I have a hand from Priscilla. Go ahead, Priscilla.
Yeah. I am really concerned with how slow we are moving with no COVID in our district and how fast other districts are moving. I really feel that our schools teachers have much more innovation than that and much more capability than what I'm seeing. Rockingham voted that it would move as quickly as possible, and this is not quick. This is going still with the 6-week plan of just keeping a hybrid and then not getting their students in there. I really think that maybe looking at some alternatives, looking at other ways that this can be, scooted up a little bit so that our children are getting the instruction that they need and require, and that 38% of our parents wanted right from day one and are not going to get even some of them until you're talking about November, and then some of them aren't even getting it then. And I understand the problems with spacing, but the spacing's been relaxed, and with it being relaxed, I don't understand why the superintendent's leadership can't go to developing a faster plan for these children to get what they need.
Chris, I'm going to ask you if you could hold a response. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Priscilla. I'm sorry. And Chris, I want you to hold that response if you have one, just a moment, because I do also have a hand from Jason Terry. So I think we should get these queries, which are from Rock Board members, out on the floor, and then you can decide how you want to respond to them, or whether you want to take it possibly to the Rock Board for discussion. So go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, David. To echo Priscilla's comments, the rules were set a while back. We started school on September 8th, and the rules were 6 weeks we would look at the plan. I know exactly how we voted for Rockingham. And the last opening I heard from the central school is November 9th, which is 9 weeks away. And we've already moved into step 3, and I'm talking K through 5 here. Step 3 says 3 feet of social distance. So I'm curious as why we're waiting so long. And I would actually like each person to answer why we're waiting so long. I'd also like to know, Mr. Pratt, you mentioned the task force several different times. I'd like to know who exactly is the directors that you mentioned on the task force other than the principals and yourself, because, I just would like to know who those people are. And, we have I don't understand why we're waiting so long. So those are my questions right now, but I'm going to have more questions on that specifically. Thank you.
Chris, you ready to respond?
Yes, yes, I am. I appreciate what board members are saying. But ultimately, I think what we're seeing is that, I'm relying on the task force, including myself, for them making the best decision based on what's best for each individual school. And that means respecting the teachers, the administrators, the school nurses, many people with education experience around that table, making those decisions on what you heard tonight. The people who head up those task force, the principals each principal or assistant principal takes the lead on the task force. It's a very involved process. And it's something that, even as superintendent, I don't think I have the right to dictate what they feel is best for each individual school. But I do support the plans that we're coming together, and we'll continue to support that. No, I don't think any of us are moving as fast as we want to, but the safety and the well-being of every single student and every single employee in these buildings, still under these most difficult times with health conditions, is that we got to keep that in the forefront. And I understand the frustration from the board of want to move faster, but the people who have to do it are making the decisions, the best decisions possible. And I understand that the Rockingham board, said we have 6 weeks to do a plan. And we're still within 6 weeks. But also, this just isn't, a Rockingham thing. This is an SU-wide thing that we got to make sure that we're still providing an equitable education and not working so independently that we're not doing that. I'm not saying I disagree with anything that any of the boards are saying, but we have to move as slow as we are, even if we don't want to.
Ms. Kennedy, I think you would like to respond to that.
I would. So I just want to represent who is on our task force. So I have my secretary, Cindy Rounds. I have my librarian, Jody Hauser. I have my custodian, Ken Lawrence. I have myself, my nurse, Jen Burke. I had 3 teachers, Kate Kane, Carrie Pickering. I also had Kelly Green. And I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anybody else, but we have a good representation from across the school. Our limitation right now is actually furniture, and a lot of the furniture was actually back ordered. We were able to get in, and Cindy worked her miracles yesterday with school specialty to rearrange an order because we need to have desks in order for the students to be sitting 3 feet apart. And we have some larger cohorts. So we were able to change colors quickly yesterday, and it sounds silly, but it's like, fine, we just need the desks, get them in there. So we're hoping they can get there as fast as possible. But even with the desk, I need to make sure I have the staff. I know Andy and Stacy are working very hard in the student services part. We have students that have one-to-one supports. We have students that have small group supports, and I can't just put students back in without the supports that they need in their IEP. It's against the law, but it's also just not good for students and what they need. So with the cohorts being divided on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, we were able to use one staff member for, say, 2 students, but that's not possible going forward with it going the 4 days a week. So I appreciate that everybody wanted to go faster. I think all of us wanted to go faster too. The 3rd, 4th grade split is the other big part of it too. We only have 1 teacher in each classroom or each grade, which adds the limitation to it because we do, with 29 students, right now with 15 students in each cohort, it is pretty close to being as full as it can be. I mean, there's no more room at the inn. And I know it's unfortunate because that's not what people want to hear. And I wish I could maybe share a picture of what Kelly Green's classroom looks like with half the cohort in there at 3 feet spacing right now. We were able to move it this week to 3 feet. And even then it is taking up the entire classroom. So we cannot fit 29 students in one classroom. And we've been advertising. I just reached out to Castleton University, to UVM, to Keene State, looking for another teacher. There's not teachers sitting there, and I don't know what to say. I mean, I could put in a substitute, but even that person is out sick right now. So that's not helping us to try and fill this position. So we're kind of at a standstill right now, and my students deserve a teacher.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. Is there any additional comment, questions? Yes, Jack Pryor, and then Jason.
Yeah. I just pulled up my other iPad, and while this conversation was going on, reviewed the Zoom call where we talked about the plans after the 6-week period was over, and we talked about transition. We did not, and I want to be clear about this, did not say, nobody said that we would go from the hybrid model to a full-time model. That was what was said, and it was said very specifically, was that we would begin the transition process if it was allowable due to the health issues. And we are apparently doing that, but I want to make certain that we don't put into the record facts that aren't there about this. The second point that I want to make is that statements about how healthy our neighbors are might not be accurate. A good portion of the towns in Massachusetts that immediately abut us are now back in the red zone, as is several of the towns in New Hampshire. This, you know, we're not going to be able to imagine or hope our way out of this, and I really want us to quit trying to do that. It's not appropriate. It's not helpful to the situation. I do, however, want to say in support of some of the discomfort that I'm seeing from people like Priscilla and Jason, and from some of our board members on the unified board, is that when we began this task force process back before school even began, we had community members on those task forces. We had some board members on those task forces. And I'd like to make certain that we make every effort to try to continue to bring them into the process. I think that I think the planning is good, but I think that some of the concerns would be of board members would be better addressed if those community members and existing board members continue to play as active a part as we can allow for, because I think that would be helpful. That's all I got.
Thank you, Jack. I want to make note of the fact that I have a hand currently from Jason Terry, also from Priscilla Lambert. I believe I have a hand from Cheryl, and I would like to recognize Cheryl, who hasn't spoken yet on the topic. And then I will go back and recognize Jason and Priscilla. So I appreciate your forbearance. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, thank you. I think I'll quickly build on what Jack was just talking about. One point of clarification is that in the beginning we had what Chris and others were referring to as the school reopening task force. That task force did include board members and community members. I think in the process that Chris described for us earlier, in this report tonight, he talked about morphing into a more school-level task force. That's the case. To my knowledge, I don't think the board members or community members have been involved in the task forces since the initial plan to the SU was released. I've not been involved. I don't think Priscilla's been involved, and others that I was working with directly. That's not a criticism from me at this point. That is a point of clarification. I believe that the reports that we've heard tonight are very grounded and thoughtful and consistent with what I'm reading as far as prudent guidance around the school reopening process. And one point around that I would make is that we've talked about 4 days a week in person for a good many students in our buildings starting October 19. And then an expansion of that November 2nd, that leaves a couple of week period there, which is a good time to determine if any infections do arise by virtue of the increased points of contact that will occur. So all in all, I'm among those who believe that everyone here, and we're very fortunate in that respect, is that all the people involved in the planning, and the many we can't see who are on a day-to-day basis working on this are really being very thoughtful and very careful. And so I want to commend and thank all of you for your effort with that.
Thank you, Cheryl. Jason, Terry, and then Priscilla. Jason, you're muted at the moment.
Sorry. Thank you, David. Jack, I agree with some of your points, and Cheryl, Carrie Kennedy, thank you for the specific update on who the task force is. You know, I think for me, you know, I'm just trying to follow the rules that are set in front of us from the state. And so the reentry plan that we came up with, you know, on page 2, and this is the frustrating part for me and maybe for other board members, is moving forward, the task force and principals will be publishing and providing updates regularly. We will continue to revisit this model so we can make the necessary changes needed to meet the students' needs. And so we haven't, unless I'm out of the email loop, but I don't remember seeing a weekly documented email with minutes of what has been talked about with the task force and reopening. And so then on the Strong and Healthy Start Guide from the state, it says, you know, page 21 of 33, updated, 3 to 6 feet is acceptable in younger students pre-K through grade 5. So if their rules are saying, do it, I don't know why we need to wait so long to do it when we knew all along that this was coming. You know, and so the frustration is not getting the updates, and the frustration is, it seems like you're dragging our feet. So I didn't make the rules. I've been trying to follow them since COVID started for me and my family. So I'm trying to do a good job following rules as a parent. You have to also think about the parents that need their kids to go back to school for, you know, so they can continue to work. It's very hard for the parents. It's very hard for the students. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Chris, I did see that you're ready to respond. I would like to hear from Priscilla, and then maybe we can have a merged response from you. Priscilla?
Yes, Cheryl, I agree with you. Thank you very much for your comments. Since Jack commented about Rockingham, who voted to do it as quickly as possible and not have to wait for the 6 weeks, I want to say that I was surprised that with only 8 children in a full classroom, it surprises me that they can't move faster there. But you know, I do understand there'd be 12 in one classroom, the kindergarten at Central, 13, 15. That is more children. I understand that. And if they're having difficulty with desks, I understand that too. However, there is one thing I do want to comment from Cheryl's is that, you know, it would give us time to see if we have more COVID. Well, we have children going to school 2 days a week, and then they're having to have childcare 3 other days a week. They're going all different places. They're being exposed to all different types of children and all different situations. If they were in school full time, they would be in a consistent environment where the interaction would be with that one set of students. And you could almost guarantee they wouldn't have to have childcare because their parents would be there at other times. So you would be limiting the amount of exposure to other groups by doing that, rather than extending it the way we have been doing. Right now, you've got one group on Monday, Tuesday, you've got a group on Thursday, Friday. Some of those children are going all 4 days. So there is a carryover from one group to the other, plus the other children that aren't going those days are going out to childcare and all kinds of places. So to me, putting them in school, you're actually putting them in a more limited situation for COVID than you are the other way. And to me, primary kids in particular, K through 4, which is what our schools are in Rockingham, that K through 4 is crucial to be having them in there 4 days minimum, but 5 days would be even better, because at least then they're getting a consistent education. 2 days a week does not give those primary level kids a consistent education. parents are great, but there are some parents that just do not have the skills to be able to teach their children. You have ones that limited capacity, but you've also got very educated parents that can't teach their children the way teachers can teach. And we need those children to be able to have that kind of an education. So it just doesn't, and with everybody coming up with the same plan, you know that this is, you know, excuse me, we really need those kids there. And it's bothering me. Thanks.
Thank you, Priscilla. Chris, do you care to respond?
I can respond to some of them. I think, you know, we're all frustrated. We're all feeling the same frustration. But I can say that faster is not better in this case. We just cannot just trudge forward with the knowing what the consequences could be. I'm not willing to do that. As far as communicating, we found out that we're moving from step 2 to step 3. I personally have put out 2 lengthy updates and a newsletter updating everyone in regards to what's going on. I've included FAQs from the state, so people are involved. I've sent it to emailed it to every family and board member, staff. So those communications are going out. We can only move so fast with communication. You know, we met as an administrative team this week. And so this is the first opportunity that we've had to share the work that we've been doing with the SU board. But I need to allow my administrative teams with their task force to do the job that they need to be doing. And that's taking the priority and the considerations of their particular building, their particular education environment into consideration. And I know people are frustrated. Like I said, we're all frustrated, but this is not the time just to push forward. We're getting the kids back. We're better off now than we were a few weeks ago, but we don't know what's going to look like tomorrow or the following week. The numbers continue to go up around the nation. We can't expect that they're just gonna jump over Southern Vermont. And so, you know, that's why I have to respond to that. The updates are going up as soon as we can get them. They're going out. I'm not just sending them out, but I know principals are sending them out as well. And we just have to be patient and not jump the gun on this. It's too much at risk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I had a hand from George Smith. Go ahead, George.
Thank you, David. I, for one, am somewhat encouraged that there's actually some forward movement here. It's not as fast as I'd like it by any means, because as a working parent, both my wife and I, we're getting killed out here. And it's brutal. We're not cut out for this. We're not cut out to be support staff for our kids in this environment. I applaud the creativity in getting people back here, but my question is, what's it going to look like? What's the planning and the brainstorming and the exploration going to look like for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade kids across the districts? And when, so I'm operating under the premise that this COVID situation isn't changing anytime soon. And I asked the question previously a couple of times, you know, are we okay with this for a long period of time? And the obvious answer is no. So I guess what I'm asking for is maybe more frequent updates as to what's been talked about in these task forces in regards to getting these specific kids, 6, 7, 8, back into the full-time instruction as the other kids. How are we going to be notified of what's going on there? I feel like these task force have been talked about, but not really talked about until it's been pressed so hard, and it's been talked about recently. I know they've been there. I understand. There's been no detail coming from that to any of us board members, at least not to me that I'm aware of. So I would like more information going forward in that regard. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, George. I have the sense that we have pretty much covered the waterfront on the issues that we have around reopening. this obviously is going to be a continuing topic for the foreseeable future and possibly the unforeseeable future. So I would very much like to move on. As I said, there is a reminder that this is old item 6A, which is now new item 4A. We are putting off the B item, which is the report on the business office from Pietro Lynn's office to executive session. And that will, yes, sir.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you at all.
You're recognized.
If we're going to have another meeting, the WNESU meets once a month, right?
That's correct, George. I mean, that's correct, Jason.
I just don't want to wait a whole nother month and then end up in the same spot that we're currently in, where the state has said, you know, we should be in 3 feet distance K through 5, and we're still going to wait a month. You know, who's to say that we're going to have a 3rd grade teacher in a month? Then, you know, then what? I mean, we're shortchanging the kids, and that's, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want what's best for the kids, all the board members, all the teachers, Mr. Pratt, everybody. So I just, you know, nobody wants anybody sick either. So nobody. I don't want anybody sick. I'd be a fool to say that. So I just don't want to wait a whole month to get another update of the same thing. So thank you.
Okay. Jason, we're on it. And Priscilla, I do have your hand. I just want to very briefly respond that at the end of the meeting on the director's comments, I'm going to ask the SU board if they feel, as some members have suggested, that we need to be meeting more frequently than once a month. Priscilla, I'm going to allow you last word on this topic and then like to keep going because we do have still a fairly lengthy agenda ahead of us. So go ahead.
I just had a thought, and it may not even be a possibility, but it's something for the central school principal to think about, and Mr. Pratt. I was wondering whether they said they had moved to using the other room for a title position, title teacher. Is that title teacher qualified to teach that extra class if they needed to, since they need another teacher? And you don't have to answer that, but it's just a thought for you to think about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Priscilla. We're now going to move to old item 4, which is new item 5, old business for discussion and action. The last meeting, I asked for a motion from the SU board to support the chair's ruling on the use of the chat in Zoom. And it's in the minutes, but I will repeat it here again. And if we can get a motion out on the floor, we can kick it around or even kick it to death if that's what members would like to do. So that motion reads as follows. It is the intent of the SU board to affirm the chair's right to establish guidelines consistent with the open meeting law for the conduct of supervisory union board meetings. It further acknowledges the chair's intent to open the chat function of Zoom to take statements during communication and public comment portion of the meeting. The chair may set a time limit for individual comments as necessary to ensure that the business of the meeting is conducted in a timely manner. These comments will be presented sequentially by the host, and upon conclusion of communication and public comment, the public chat function shall be closed until the board's questions and answers period at the end of the meeting, when the board shall again entertain questions presented through the chat function. So that was the motion that I had proposed to this board. I think we agreed that we were not going to take action on it last week, but I would like to ask the SU board at this point in time to reconsider that motion, and let's examine whether the SU board has the confidence in the chair to run these meetings under the new world of Zoom and ensure that the public does have its participation. So I would like, for the purpose of discussion, to get that motion on the floor with a second. Any takers?
I'd make that motion.
Thank you, Molly. Do I have a second? And George has a second. Okay. I'm going to ask your forbearance to speak to the motion. We obviously are operating our school boards in extraordinary times. We are now operating in an electronic format, which I think still for many of us is sort of a foreign environment. I certainly find this taxing. But I've noticed another interesting phenomenon, and that is that we have had a huge increase in the participation in these meetings. Right now, we're bumping right up around 49 or 50 participants. We were over 50 participants earlier this evening, and we've had at least one meeting where we've actually cracked the 200 participant mark. So it does suggest to me that it's an exercise in democratic participation that we are doing a better job of reaching many of our constituents than we may have been doing when we had live meetings. I certainly would like to return to live meeting format because it's infinitely easier as this chair to run those meetings, but I do note that there have been some advantages of it. I think also we need to recognize the fact that this is the new environment. We never had Zoom when we had public school board meetings, and I want to also point out to the board that I have always, in my stint as a chairperson in this district extends back to 2006 at the high school. And I would like to point out that there's a fundamental difference between a school board meeting and some of the possible formats that we could use in Zoom, and that is this. We are school boards coming together here as a WNESU board to try to work on common goals. However, this is not in my judgment, this is not a town meeting format where it's open participation and all people in the room are members of the body. That's not the case with school boards. It is the elected directors of a school board who constitute the body of the school board. And I think it's important that we remember that at the same time that we try to ensure that the public does have the opportunity to have their inputs. It's my belief that the primary purpose of communication and public comment is to allow members of the public to comment on issues which are before the board for consideration. And I think it's also the right of the public under communication and public comment to comment on items which are not before the board for consideration, but maybe they think we should be paying attention to. And I think that we as an SU board, and my limited knowledge of high school activities, high school certainly welcomes public participation, and I've been to both the Rock meetings and the Union Elementary meetings, and they turn out pretty good share of the public at those as well. So I'm asking this board to support the chair, and I'm asking this board to recognize the fact that at all times we operate under the open meeting law, because that's what we are obligated to do here in Vermont, and that open meeting law never actually anticipated the chat. And I think the chat can be useful, but I think we need to use the chat effectively and not allow it to overwhelm our meeting. So pardon me for speaking here at length, but obviously I've given it quite a bit of consideration. So I would like to open the floor now to additional questions or comments. And Deb Wright, I know that you and I have had some dialogue around this. Would you like to comment, Deb?
Yes, it's thank you very much, David. it's clear that boards operate do their business in the public, but they're not meetings of the public. It's different than annual meeting day where every voter gets to be a legislator and have their say. However, it is clear that the pandemic has forced us into the 21st century, which is to utilize a method that we have basically many people abhorred, which is to use the internet to communicate, has become the foremost tool we have to use these days, and probably into the foreseeable future. And even when things become whatever the new normal is, we will still need to use it, and probably should, because what I recognize is, and that's another purpose of the chat, many people clearly want to come to our meetings and have something to say, or at least an opportunity to have that say, if they can, as reasonably and responsibly and maturely as possible. However, parents with children cannot participate the way I'm talking to you, because if you've got a loud room of kids running around and trying to get people to do things and calm down, and dogs and cats and the whole shebang, the reality is the chat feature allows you to have make a comment without, or ask a question without having to use audio. So it has its purpose, and I am respectful that needs to be only a reasonable opportunity for comment by the public, but I don't believe that we should eliminate that tool when it is clearly available to us with the use of Zoom. And I do believe that in the future, we will continue to use this as not just an alternative, but an addition to our regular meetings, even when we're all looking each other in the face. Thank you.
Deb, thank you. And you didn't specifically speak to it, but I think there are benefits in terms of complying with the ADA, Americans with Disability Act, through the use of the chat. So thank you for
That's
making
true as
that
well.
comment.
Yes.
Do I have other hands? Okay, Priscilla. You're recognized, Priscilla. All you got to do is unmute and you're on.
There, okay, it wouldn't unmute for me, I don't know why. My only concern, I appreciate Deb's comments and I do hear her, but when I read over the minutes from the last board meeting, which were our lawyer, and we're paying our lawyer for good advice, and the lawyer says that she discourages use of the chat function during the board meetings via Zoom. It is not consistent with the open meeting law. The board will utilize Robert's Rules of Order, meaning public can speak when recognized by the chair or as part of public comment, preferring the practice of the public stating position with camera on when possible. We should try to replicate real meetings in context of virtual meetings. Pietro encourages the boards to turn off the chat function. And since she's putting that in there as a lawyer and giving us advice based on that, it does concern me to have the chat function on. We wouldn't allow that at a regular meeting going on in the background while we were sitting there having a meeting. And yet you've got chat going on and disparagements and all kinds of things. So it does make me uncomfortable to have the chat on. I think having the person speak in person is much more important. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Priscilla. And I'm going to recognize Molly in just a moment, but I do want to point out that the motion would specify that the chat would be available both during communication and public comment and at times when we're taking questions and answers, which we've been doing toward the end of our meetings lately. So Molly, go ahead.
Thank you, David. That's really what I wanted to make sure everybody's clear of, is we are not shutting it. So if somebody is uncomfortable with a video or has a loud house and wants to type instead of talk, there's no reason why they can't do that in a Zoom meeting. I could do that right now to you instead of talk to you. If my insecurity was having you see me at my camper, then that's what I did. So we're not shutting the public out. And I feel, people are gonna laugh at this, I feel the same way you do, David. I've been in the chair's position for a long time in different boards, and it is very hard to run a meeting sometimes if you don't make sure that you're holding yourself to the rules too. And you want the public to come, you want the public to be involved, but they have to let us do our business also. So I think we just need to make sure we're aware that we are not shutting the public out. We are telling them that they can have communication, public comments at the beginning of the meeting, and then if they continue to stay with us and they have a question or something at the end of the meeting, we are asking them to let us know about that. So I think this is a pretty clean way. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Jack Fryer?
As the one person probably in this group that actually did belong at one time to the National Association of Parliamentarians, I did send you, David, some notes, probably rather lengthy ones.
Yes, you did.
Probably more elaborate than anything you really wanted to see about this issue. The issue, just to explain to my colleagues, there actually have been some rulings, none adopted in Vermont, but in Virginia and other states, about specifically how to do Zoom meetings and to how to incorporate some of their features, such as chat, into them. The problem with chat is it simply a running commentary, like Facebook comments after somebody's posted something, or is it in fact supposed to be an integral part of the meeting? You have to make a decision about that. You have to decide which it is. You have to establish as policy what you're going to do. And once you've adopted a policy around these issues, it really almost doesn't matter what your policy is, as long as everybody knows that you have one and that it's written down. The suggested uses for chat are fairly limited. They are for people to drop documents into a discussion among the members. It is a way for you to have public comment, have more detailed comment, similar to what we do verbally, but allow people who are perhaps a little more shy or want to organize their thoughts to use it. Another way you can use chat is when we have these somewhat elaborate motions that sometimes get dropped into meetings. It gives you a chance to write those out so everybody can see them and they can be shared. Otherwise, if the material in the comments, in the chat, is not a material part of the meeting, if it's not stuff that's going to be addressed by the chair or by the body, it's not part of the meeting and should be treated as not part of the meeting, which means it should be turned off during those periods. When we have meetings such as those huge forums that we had about finances, that's a great place where you encourage people to post their comments and have somebody, usually the chair or a designated third party, read those and address them in order. But you have to, it either has to be part of your meeting or not. You simply have to declare what the ground rules are. David's ground rules aren't the ones I would have used, but they're perfectly acceptable. But you have to have something, and you have to make certain that we all understand the difference between a conscious policy to incorporate chat into the meeting or just kind of having it run with it as some sort of parallel thing that is like having a bunch of people talk outside the hallway when a meeting's going on, which is what sometimes it can look like when it's just kind of left as a running commentary. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Do I have any other hands? I would like to read the motion one more time and then see if we're ready to vote on it. And the motion is, it is the intent of the SU board to affirm the chair's right to establish guidelines consistent with the open meeting law for the conduct of supervisory union board meetings. It further acknowledges the chair's intent to open the chat function of Zoom to take statements during the communication and public comment portion of the meeting. The chair may set a time limit for individual comments as necessary to ensure that the business of the meeting is conducted in a timely manner. These comments will be presented sequentially by the host, and upon conclusion of communications and public comment, the chat function shall be closed until the board's questions and answers period at the end of the meeting, when the board shall again entertain questions presented through the chat function. Does everyone have that motion? Priscilla, you have a hand up?
David, you had said there that you're going to set a time limit for individual comments as necessary to ensure the business of the meeting. You cannot set a time limit if it's in the chat. That doesn't allow for that. So right there, it doesn't work.
Actually, you
with
can.
all due respect, Priscilla, most of us, at least I can't type as quickly as I speak. And a comment that arrives through chat, in my limited experience, tends to be a lot more succinct than some of the comments that you hear in these meetings beginning with the chair. So I'm hopeful that Zoom would simply facilitate communication and not actually be an impediment to length. And my reference to length specifically, Priscilla, was that we will have nights when we may have 2 or 3 or 4 people who wish to comment on items, and we will have nights where we may have 24 people that wish to comment on items. And when you have 24 people, if you gave them all 2 minutes apiece, you'd be burning up the better part of an hour. Whereas if you had 4 people and you gave them 5 minutes apiece, you'd be burning up the better part of 20 minutes. I'm simply saying that I think the chair needs to have the discretion to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to be heard, which in some cases may mean setting time limits on comment. But it's, in my judgment, not necessary to set a finite limit of, say, 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes, but rather make sure that if we do have to set time limits, that they're appropriate to the circumstances in which we're running our meeting. I hope that's an answer that
David, that doesn't answer it, because once again, if it's a comment on a chat room, you cannot limit the length of time of the comment, and you cannot limit the content of it, of the thing, either to be appropriate for the board level. It can be something that is totally nothing to do with something that needs to come to the board or to the meeting. And sometimes that can be brought up in a verbal thing as well, and that's okay. But at least verbally, then you can limit. But you do not have the capability of limiting if it's in the chat and you're running a chat room.
Priscilla, I would apply in those circumstances a standard that I would refer to as parliamentary language. As long as the comment is within what I think would be generally considered acceptable bounds for a public statement, I think it's acceptable whether we like the topic or not. And I hear clearly what you're saying. And as I indicated before when I tail-ended Deb Wright, I think there are going to be people who, for whatever reason, are not going to be able to necessarily make an on-camera verbal statement. And I think that we need to be able to accommodate those situations. And certainly that is, one of the benefits that I do see coming out of the new normal here with Zoom meetings. So yes, I clearly hear your concern. I'm going to ask one more time if everyone is ready to consider the motion. Is there additional?
I had my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jess, I missed your hand. Please go right ahead.
Just speaking to Priscilla, I think the way the motion is written, that comments submitted via chat will actually be read by the host. So I think the 2-minute rule would apply at that point. Is that correct, David, that they're being read by the host, or are they being submitted to public chat?
Let me see if I can find my place on that quickly here. These comments will be presented sequentially by the host, and upon conclusion of communication and public comment, the public chat function shall be closed. And if I can skip it, until questions and answers. So yes, Jessa, if we were operating under a 2-minute format, a Zoom question would need to meet that 2-minute format. If we were operating under an unlimited format, then if the chair felt that it was necessary to edit a question or comment because of the need to conduct a orderly and efficient meeting, then that's the way I would rule on it.
So they will be directly to the host and presented verbally by the chair?
That, well, it would be my intent that either the chair or the chair's host, which would be what I would define as the meeting facilitator, would present the comment orally.
Call the vote, please.
Question on that. Is that mean that it's still in public format though, right?
Point of
Yes,
order, I
but
asked to call the vote.
And I do want to acknowledge Deb's point of order. Deb wishes to call the question. So
Oh, I didn't hear.
Oh, okay.
No.
So I will roll call the board on Deb's request to call the question, beginning with you, Deb. Call the question, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Molly?
Yes.
Priscilla?
No.
Okay. George?
Yes.
Okay. Jason?
Yes.
Okay. Cheryl?
Yes.
Okay. Jessa?
Not as presented, thank you.
Okay, so you would be a no. Jack?
Yes.
Okay. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses, 2 noes, and the chair has not voted. So we are now under the motion. All those in favor of the motion, I will roll call you and ask you for your aye or nay or yes or no. Deb?
Aye.
Thank you. Molly?
Aye.
Priscilla?
No.
Okay. George?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
Jessa?
No.
Jack?
Aye.
Okay. The aye votes do have it. So you have passed a motion giving the chair direction, and I appreciate everyone's help with this. Let's see if we can keep moving here. I'm taking note of the fact it's 11 minutes past 8, and we're going to be here a while longer. But we'll try and move through the rest of this agenda as rapidly as we can and still do a good job. Okay. We're down to old item 5, which is new item 6, and that is new business for discussion and action. Item A is establish a building search committee. And Priscilla, you did raise what I would describe as parliamentary objection to that. Could you please explain that?
I was just saying that it wasn't the last one, because as of March, we needed to reassign people on there, and we were in this COVID situation in March, so.
Priscilla, let me ask
So
you,
we need a,
would it be acceptable to you, Priscilla, if the SU board were to reaffirm the search committee, and that would presume that those who served would be willing to continue their service? Would that be comfortable for you?
all of our members aren't, all of the ones on that search committee aren't still on the boards.
Okay. In that case, would you accept a motion to direct the chair to create a search committee? It would be understood, although not part of the motion, the chair would first be approaching those who had previously served, and if necessary, appoint for any positions that are vacant. And you could possibly incorporate that language in a motion if you can put it together.
Give me a sec.
Make a suggestion, Priscilla?
I'm trying to write.
Okay.
Doesn't the chair just appoint vacancies, not the committee? I mean, it shouldn't it be volunteers for the committee and then?
Make the motion that way, and let's see if the board is good with that.
Make a motion that we establish a building search committee with volunteers to serve on the committee.
Okay. Does your motion direct the chair to appoint as necessary?
No, it did not. It
Right.
it said to serve, because that way any of those members that are already on it can volunteer.
Okay. Thank
That were
you.
on it last year.
Thank you, Priscilla. We're under discussion. Jack Breyer.
Since you have a standing committee, you don't need to reestablish it each year. What you do need to do is simply appoint members to it each year. So you have so the proper way of structuring this would be to have a motion to permit the chair to appoint members of the building committee. And I would be perfectly happy to support such a motion, but that's the way it should be phrased. Not to pick on anybody, but technically that's what you're looking for.
Priscilla, what's your
Well, it's not a standing because we've got a new year. And you have to establish a committee each year.
No, I'm sorry, Priscilla, you don't have to reestablish all your standing committees every year. You only have to appoint them. We have a negotiations committee. We don't reappoint a negotiations committee every year. We have educational policy committees on many of our boards. We don't reestablish them every year. We simply have the chair appoint new members. I'm not trying to be really picky about this, but I think it's important just for members to understand how this stuff works, because they're going to be on this board for a long time, I'm hoping, and they'll want to get facile with how we do this so that we have a minimum of confusion.
Well, is the business of a committee standing? I didn't think it was.
Until such time as we have a new building, yes. Just like until we have such time as complete negotiations, yes.
Comment from others. Molly.
Sure.
So we had this started and the COVID started and we had to stop because we weren't allowed to get together and we weren't allowed to go look at things at real estate. So some of us have already worked some on this, and I think that's, I think that probably that's what you're heading towards. That's what Jack's heading towards. I get that we want to be able to let people get involved. Absolutely. I want people involved, but there's a little core group of us that have already done quite a bit of work on this. So, if you all of a sudden get 9 hands up and everybody wants to volunteer, that's a lot of people to do this job and it'll be too hard. So I just throwing that out there that Jack is absolutely right. We have worked on this. There is one member that is not on a board anymore that was part of our group. Everybody else is still board members. So really, maybe what we need to do is have the Rockingham board decide which person wants to volunteer to be on that committee with us.
What's your reaction to that, Priscilla? Because it sounds to me like what Molly's suggesting here is that we simply affirm that we have a standing committee, but have a Rockingham vacancy that we would like Rockingham board to appoint.
If it's a standing committee, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I was just trying to go by procedures. We have other committees that, you know, I don't know if they're standing committees either. So that's all I was getting at.
So you do have a motion here, Priscilla, and would you be willing to remake it along the lines that Molly has suggested here, and noting the fact that Rockingham would then appoint for the vacancy from their board?
Okay, so yes, with reaffirming the members that were previously, were on it at the previous year, with the Rockingham board selecting a member to replace our member on that board.
Okay, SU board, are we ready for the motion? Motion would be to affirm the membership of the Building Search Committee with Rockingham appointing for the Rockingham vacancy. I will roll call us. Cheryl Charles.
Aye.
Thank you. Jessa.
Aye.
Got it. Jack.
Aye.
Priscilla.
Aye.
George.
Aye.
Jason.
Aye.
Deb.
Aye.
Molly.
Aye.
Okay, we have direction. We will have more discussion about the real estate aspect of the committee's work in executive session, because as I believe board members are aware that real estate transactions or possible transactions are considered to be executive session material. Okay, so we have worked through business search committee. B here is Hcrs late payment. I think some members may be aware and some members may not be aware that there was a request early last week to sign a check in the amount of $219,000 payable to Hcrs for services which were rendered during fiscal year 2020. Deb and I, who are your signers, wanted to slow that process down a little bit so we could have a better understanding of how that situation worked. Andy was kind enough to forward me a copy of a current Hcrs contract, which, Andy, if I am correct, was simply an updated 2020 contract with a 2021 expiration date on it. And if memory serves me well here, and you can help me with this, Andy, the terms were half upon signing and the other half not later than January 31st of the January after signing. So we currently have Hcrs contracts for fiscal year 2021, which were signed this month. And if you do some fast math, that would suggest that we were more than 6 months late on paying Hcrs for the balance of their 2020 services. And we should address that oversight here timely. There are some personnel aspects to this which we will be discussing under business office oversight and executive session, but at least here in the public portion of the meeting, I wanted you, Andy, if you would give us an overview of the work that HCRS does on behalf of WNESU.
Sure. Thank you, David. So HCRS is the, and I honestly don't know what the acronym stands for, David. So
Healthcare and Rehabilitation Services, Andy.
Thank you. So they're our local mental health provider, and through a grant, which is Success Beyond 6 is the name of the grant, they are able to offer school-based clinicians to provide in-school mental health services to students, and also behavior interventionists who work one-on-one with students who may need that kind of support. And so last year with HCRS, we employed, or we contracted for 4 school-based clinicians. We were originally supposed to have 6. They weren't able to fill 2 of the positions. But we essentially have a school-based clinician in each building, and we placed them in there, and their primary role, as I said, is to provide mental health services to students primarily who have individualized education plans. They do also provide some services to students who have a 504 plan, or might even be on an educational support plan. It's typically one-on-one services. They will do some group services, small groups, also provide mostly around social skills building, because it's hard to build social skills one-on-one. Typically you would do that in a small group. And then the behavior interventionist is just typically someone who has gotten more training in how to curb behaviors and to address behaviors. And then what comes along with the behavior interventionist is a board certified behavior analyst, or a BCBA, who then supervises the BI, we call them. And so we do a lot of tracking of behavior. We do a functional behavior analysis, and then develop a behavior plan. And then that plan is worked and tweaked, hopefully to, eliminate the plan. That's ultimately always our goal, is to eliminate the plan and have the student be independent. So.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Any questions about healthcare rehabilitation services? Okay, we're going to be returning to this in just a few minutes, I believe, in executive session. That brings us down to questions and answers. Lynn, Carey, do we have any questions sitting in the chat, or do we have hands from any members of the public here?
I do not see any right now. I'm checking. No, we're all just focused on listening.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. All right, then we're down to director's comments. Deb, you want to start us off tonight? Is that right?
I think I'm good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Molly?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Priscilla? Okay. George?
Looking forward to grades 6, 7, 8 coming back full time. Thanks.
Thank you, George. Jason?
I have nothing.
Okay. Cheryl?
I have nothing at this time. Thank you very much.
Okay. Jessa?
No, I'm all set. Thanks.
Jack?
At some point in the next several months, I'd love us to do perhaps an online version of our old annual retreats. And I'd like us to focus on 2 items. One would be tech training, because I think that's still an outstanding issue. And the other might be on parliamentary procedure. I hate being the House pedant about how this stuff works. And if we get all our board members a little more familiar with the details of how one manages these things, I think that meetings will go a little smoother and people will feel more comfortable in their roles.
Thank you, Jack. My comment is that I would like to discuss with Chris Pratt and maybe get input from boards as to whether it would be a useful tool if the SU board were to meet twice a month. That's my comment. We should be setting a date of next meeting, which on my calendar would appear to be October 28th. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, I believe so. I can call up the calendar and check that while you finish up.
All right. And then I'm going to be looking now for a motion to go into executive session.
No.
Yes.
David, can we do a meeting on the 14th as well then?
Well, that's what that's what I would like to discuss with Chris. I think it would be helpful, Priscilla. But
David, you are correct. The next meeting is on October 28th, and I'm open to whatever the board wants to do for the next meeting.
Okay, so let us see how much business that we would have for a meeting on the 14th, Priscilla. Certainly, if we have anything significant, particularly with regard to school operations, and I think we should meet on the 14th. Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to go into executive session, and that would be for a discussion of real estate. It would be to discuss business office oversight, and it would be to discuss the Lynn Law report on the business office. It is possible that action may occur as a result of executive session, but I'm not sure that that is likely. I simply want to mention it so that we're upfront with the public. So a motion, please. Thank you, Cheryl. And do I have a second? And I got a second from George. Okay, all those in favor of entering executive session, I'm going to suggest we could take a 2-minute recess between the time we vote the motion and the time we begin. All right, so let me roll call here. Deb Wright?
Aye.
Thank you. Molly?
Aye.
Priscilla?
Aye.
Thank you. George?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
Jessa?
Aye.
Jack?
Aye.
It's 8:30. Let us.
Point of order. I wanted to ask, are we inviting any
Thank you, Deb.
administration
Yes,
in?
and we would be inviting administration to attend. Thank you, Deb. Good catch.